Minnesota is a pretty awesome state, and I've made a lot of videos about our interesting history and our culture, our weather extremes, just the Minnesota experience in general. But I kind of wanted to make a video about the impact that our little flyover state has had on the rest of the country and the world. Because I feel like when people who aren't from Minnesota think about Minnesota, they just think it's that weird place that their cousin lives that's always 40 below and has that really big mall and a bunch of lakes. But for well over a century, Minnesota has given the country and the world a lot of different things that make it go round. Going all the way back to the 1880s and for the following half century, Minneapolis was known as Mill City. And that's because Minnesota produced 70% of the entire world's wheat in that time frame. And a lot of that wheat was milled into flour right in Minneapolis. By the 1930s, import tariffs on wheat had started shifting the milling industry to Canadian border towns out east, like in Buffalo, New York. And the industry did eventually disappear here in Minneapolis. But some of the remnants of the bygone flour capital of the world still exist along the riverbanks. Some of the old mills have been repurposed into newer buildings. Some still remain just as a couple standing walls after flour dust explosions leveled those mills. And oh yeah, I bet you didn't know that. Flour dust, very explosive. Was actually a pretty common problem back in the day. These mills would just blow up like meth labs. And there's even the Mill City Museum, which is an old mill that's been repurposed into a museum, and it's a cool vibe and a cool place to go check out this piece of Minneapolis history if you ever get the chance. But hey, we didn't peak in high school. I got more to talk about. About the same time Minnesota was making sure that everybody in the world could bake their cookies, we were also making sure that they could build, well, everything. Minnesota started mining iron ore in 1884 and expanded to 3 separate iron ranges in the state by 1911. And these mining jobs are actually one of the biggest reasons that all those big burly Scandinavians immigrated to Minnesota in the first place. These iron ore mines made Minnesota the largest producer of iron ore in the entire country. And that means the iron that made the guns and the machines that were used to fight the Nazis and the Japanese in World War II, the majority of it was pulled out of the ground right here in Minnesota. In fact, the war effort consumed so much that by the end of it, there was almost no high-grade iron ore left in the ground in this state. But that didn't stop us, and we just came up with a way to economically process low-grade iron ore called taconite, which has allowed Minnesota to keep its throne as the country's largest iron ore producer to this day. So there's a good chance that the steel in your life, from your car to your cookware, started life right here in the Iron Range of Minnesota. Also a good chance your Thanksgiving turkey comes from Minnesota, as we produce the most of those, the most sweet corn, the most green peas, and the most sugar beets. So if you're eating something sweet, there's a good chance the sugar was grown right here too. And our biggest industry by GDP is advanced manufacturing. If it's high tech, there's a solid chance that it was manufactured right here in Minnesota. Minnesota is also home to 18 Fortune 500 companies, covering almost every industry you can think of, from healthcare to banking, retail to food, manufacturing to everything that 3M does. And to top it all off, the largest privately held company in the entire world, Cargill, calls Minnesota its home as well. So just remember, when you think about old Auntie Lena up in Minnesota, that her little flyover state has probably affected your daily life a lot more than you have ever realized.